Welcome to Real-ationship Goals, a podcast all about the realities of healthy relationships. Real-ationship Goals is a project of the Advocacy Center for Crime Victims and Children in Waco, Texas. If you or someone you know has experienced sexual violence or harassment and is seeking support, services, or needs more information, links to resources and our hotline number can be found in the description. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of their organizations or affiliates. Welcome back to Real-ationship Goals. This is episode 6 of season 4. Thank you for joining us this season. We hope you're enjoying it so far. My name is Allie.
I'm Arianna.
And I'm Blythe.
Okay, I have our story for this week, and it consists of the movie Twitches. So yes, very popular movie. It's on, I think, any streaming services, but it's mostly popular on Disney Plus. So if you have not watched that, I recommend that. Okay, so little background story. The movie is about two twin witches that were born in a different dimension called Coventry. And so the purpose of them going to another dimension was because it was to protect them from the darkness. And so their guardians had to separate them at birth, right? So fast forwarding to 21 years later, it's their 21st birthday. One has the power of having visions before anything happens, and one has the gift of drawing things before they happen. So they finally meet, like one is out looking for a job and one is out just shopping her life away. And so they run into each other at a store, and then they come to figure out that they have powers. So like when they lock hands together, like they make things move or something shape shifts or something happens. Okay. And so fast forwarding again, like they finally like go to the other twin's house, and the twins' closet is like conformed into some type of portal where they can go to their other dimension. And they did not know this. So they just fall into their other dimension, and they finally figure out what Coventry looks like. And so as they're in Coventry, they get to meet their birth mother and figure out that their kingdom is still in like danger of this darkness. And so one twin has always had the desire to meet their birth mother, and the other twin she loves her life the way it is. She doesn't bother, because one is scared to save their kingdom, and one wants to meet their birth mother and save their kingdom. So in the midst of that, they got into a big heated argument, and another twin says hurtful things that might not have been the best words to say. And so, but like towards the end, they eventually figure out that, hey, this is the purpose of our mission. Our mission is to save our kingdom and to meet our birth mother and to finally like feel whole. So basically the purpose of this story is like, even though you might get into a heated argument and there's high emotions involved, that you can also get your point across and also get your mission completed. So yeah, that was the purpose of Twitches.
Nice.
Thanks.
Who's in that? Tia and Tamara Mowry, right?
Yes.
Sister.
Yes, the twins. Famous.
Also sister, phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like sneaking in here early with some recommendations.
Yeah, absolutely. So going off of Arianna's story, which like I haven't thought about them or that movie in I think since I was like 11. So incredible. But today we're talking about anger. So this season, right, we've been talking about uncomfortable feelings that we experience within relationships. Anger being one of them that is both uncomfortable to like experience yourself and to have someone else like be angry at you within a relationship. So anger can be elicited by a lot of things, right? An insult, aggression, like perceiving something is unjust or unfair. And anger is a really good response to something that is unjust or unfair. It often comes with like some bodily experiences of like, I know like my heart, like when I'm angry, like my heart starts racing. Or sometimes like your palms might get sweaty or you get like hot. Like if you think of the like Inside Out, the like little red guy who is anger is like flaming, right? So like anger is often like we experience it as being hot. So today, or I'm gonna just kind of open up the question. Why is anger, though it's a really normal emotion and not like a bad emotion in and of itself, right? It's about how we respond to anger. Why is that like maybe an uncomfortable feeling that we experience in relationships?
Yeah, I think that depending on the kind of relationship we're talking about, anger can feel sort of like opposite or contrary to how we more broadly feel about this person, right? Whether it is a friend or a romantic partner or even a family member, let's say we have a good relationship with that person, a healthy relationship. And like the reality is no matter who you're in a relationship with, however compatible you are, however healthy it is, you are going to get angry at that person at some point, and they are going to get angry at you, whether it's like a big kind of thing or a small thing. Like, you're different people. And so I think that one reason that it can feel uncomfortable, and for me sort of like feels uncomfortable to admit to, like it's hard for me to admit that I'm feeling angry at like my best friends or even sometimes my family members, because it's like, well, but I love you, and I care about you, and I want what's best from you, and I want to spend time with you, but also I'm angry at you. And so I think the like sort of way that doesn't feel compatible with your more like the broader relationship or your broader feelings about that person, I think that is what can make it, or at least a thing that can make it feel uncomfortable to have this very normal emotion in relationship to another person.
Yeah, I think it's just an umbrella just for like different emotions as well. Like as far as like with shame, sadness, because sometimes even when you get into an argument with ones you love, whether it be family, a friend, or even a romantic partner, sometimes when it can become sad because it's like, hey, I don't want to react this way towards the person I love. So that's one way of looking at it as well.
Yeah, which is a good point, and how almost like anger is like an uncomfortable emotion, but it can also be like maybe like a safer emotion, or like an easier emotion to express, or like it might be easier to say like I'm angry than to say I'm feeling betrayed, or I'm feeling guilty, or I'm feeling disappointed, or something like that. So yeah, I'm glad you phrased it as like an umbrella.
I think that can like also, I think that can happen. I also think the opposite can happen, where it's like we say like, well, I'm just feeling frustrated, right? Or I'm just feeling like I can't think of another one, but frustrated, right? And we don't sort of like admit to ourselves or the person we're in a relationship with that like, actually, I'm angry with you, right? Because anger can also feel like a more intense, more like direct, more definitive thing. I think about like the emotions like wheel, which is like kind of where the Inside Out characters come from, right? Because like there's this huge wheel. We can like include a link to it or something in our show notes, but like there's this huge wheel with like, it's really for me like I cannot understand how there's so many emotions on this wheel, because it feels like there's not that many, but there are. But they all sort of like come from like 4 or 5 core emotions. And then it's like, if you break down like frustration, like, well, if you get all the way down to the root of frustration, that comes out of an anger space, right? Now, anyway, we could go on forever about the emotions wheel, but I just want to say that like I think that both of those things can be true. Like it can feel easier to say anger than like examining what that feeling is, and it also can feel easier to say something that feels like less intense or confrontational than just like anger, right? Or and it's also saying like I'm frustrated, which makes it feel a little more like this is something that I'm having to deal with. Where if it's like I'm angry at you, Arianna, then it's something that like you might have to deal with, right? Does that make sense?
I'm feeling very targeted now, like because like I've never thought about it this way, but like I do that. Like I'll insert my go-to substitutes are either like frustrated or like upset, or something like that. Like I'm upset at this thing, or like I'm frustrated by this thing because it. Yeah, I feel like I need to process this down in this space. But like because anger feels like, I don't know, like that has to be like a certain level of like intensity, or like something big enough has to happen for like it to be like, oh yes, I'm angry, which is like not true, like which is not true, and in which maybe like part of me is then associating with like anger, I don't know, is, and like this is an untrue association, but like I think it's easy to associate something like anger with like I don't know, like an intense like response to it. Or like, right, we know that anger is normal, and the biggest thing is like, how do we respond to anger? And so maybe it's like, oh well, I don't know, if I'm angry, that means like I like don't want to have like a big response, therefore let me substitute another word. Yeah.
I think anger also just like displays how it's like a quick reaction, because sometimes it's like when you're in the heat of the moment, you don't really think about it. It's like, I am so angry, I am so frustrated at this person. So the quickest reaction to that is just showing anger. And
Sure.
so yeah, I just think it's like a hesitation to actually identify what you're feeling. Why are you feeling this? And it's just like a quick reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that, as we think about this in the context of relationships, it's important to, as we've already said, and we'll say just every time we get the opportunity, like it's normal to be angry at a person you're in a relationship with. It's normal to have an argument. And then there are healthy and unhealthy ways to deal with that. And we've had other episodes that have touched on this. We just had our grudges episode, which anger can really lead into sort of a cycle of grudges. We've had a conflict resolution episode. We've had an episode last season about like, we need to talk about this anger, but I'm too angry to talk right now. Like I need a break. And so I guess like y'all help me think about some like in a context of a relationship, like healthy or unhealthy ways to kind of work through that anger within that relationship.
Okay, maybe to start with like healthy things first.
Sure, yeah.
I think, and this is really, Arianna, kind of going off of what you were saying, but like sometimes when we're angry, it's easy to make quick decisions. And so to really, and we've talked about this previously, but like a cool down period of like taking it like a step away as much as you can, like from the thing that is like really making you angry, and like if possible, right, that's physically stepping away. We know that that's not, I don't know, like if you're in school and you're in class and there's somebody next to you that you are so mad at, like you probably can't leave the room, or you physically could, but there would be like a lot of consequences to that. And so like like a cool down period that, in that case could just like, okay, I'm going to take some really deep breaths, or I'm going to, do something to like, not necessarily like distract yourself, but like make this thing not so center of mind. I think is one thing. Yeah. And whatever that cool down period looks like, whether, I don't know, you play basketball, or you listen to music, or you go talk to a friend, or go for a walk, or just take deep breaths because you're in class and you can't do any of those things, is one. Yeah.
Also, like, even with you not being able to like leave a classroom, or even like with a sibling, like being assertive and respectful about what's making you angry. It's just like slowing down, and like you can still get your point across without it being like really targeting. So like, for instance, like with a sibling, like when I shared rooms with my siblings, and they'll go to my side and they'll mess up my room, and it's like, okay, I don't appreciate what you just did to my room. Can you please not do that again? Even though I am angry and in high emotions, I still can get my point across, and just it's not such a quick reaction. It's been thought out, and it's been processed of why I'm feeling this way, and hopefully they will understand why I'm feeling this way.
I think that's good. And I think like we talked about taking breaks, right, and communicating that you need a break. Like it's 100% fine and good to do that, right? But there's the importance, which we've talked about in another episode, of communicating that to whoever you're in a relationship with, whoever you're angry at or with. That can and I think just like, taking that breath, taking that moment, taking a step away. I'm thinking about like a lot of times, like anger can, like, I mean, it is intense, and I think like are ways to sort of like neutralize and neutralize that feeling and make sure we're not saying, not that you shouldn't feel that feeling, but make sure we're not reacting or saying things fully out of that anger space. Because like what comes out can be pretty hurtful. And it can be, and that's where we kind of start to get into that unhealthy, where we're thinking about like that can come out pretty aggressively, or you can be acting or responding very aggressively, which is more unhealthy, where we're starting to, you know, cross that line. Like it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to like sort of like attack someone or their character or whatever, right?
Sure. Yeah, focusing on like I'm thinking of I think like we've talked about this with like younger students, of like using phrases like I feel angry when you did an action, and then either like, and this is why I felt angry, or and now this is what I need, like focusing on like, hey, the thing that like you did like made me feel this way, also like focusing on action and like doing so in a really respectful way. Okay, unhealthy ways to respond to anger. We've kind of, it sounds like we're getting into that, those treacherous waters.
Well, this might be jumping to kind of like the next spot on sort of like the spectrum of responses and relationships, but I do, as always, want to make sure that we say that like a sort of like anything physical is past unhealthy and is towards like abusive. So any type of violent behavior, and violent is not just physical, like right, violence also includes our words, because our words can be violent, right, as well, and the way that we act outside of physical things can also be violent. So I think anytime I've sort of jumped over unhealthy into abusive and violent and dangerous, but anytime that happens, that is 100% not okay. You should always feel safe, and part of feeling safe in a relationship is having the ability to express anger with someone, right? So I've sort of jumped over here, but
no, and I think that's good. And I think I've been thinking about like responding like in a way like with an intent to like harm that person, whether harm like physically or like I'm so angry with my sibling, I am gonna just mess up their room because I know that like I'm angry with them, and so therefore I want to retaliate, and I know this thing is gonna cause like harm, then in a loose term of like it's gonna make them super upset, and you know, because they just think this thing to hurt me, so I want to do this thing to hurt them, which feels in the very abusive tendency, but I guess like it could also model like unhealthy things as well.
Kind of basically touching on you don't fight fire with fire.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think kind of at the opposite end too, and this might be more unhealthy, or like in the unhealthy realm than like an abusive realm, of like just ignoring anger or like not talking about it or not addressing it, is also unhealthy, because if we don't address conflict, right, anger is often very intertwined with conflict, that like doesn't mean it's going to go away or like actually lead to like flourishing in this relationship. Might make us like feel better in the moment, makes me feel better in the moment, but yeah, it's just also like not a healthy, it's like sustainable thing to do. So I think it often at times will come out in other ways.
I also want to acknowledge that when we talk about this, I say this with students a lot, because like when we talk about anger and the ways we respond to it, the way that we're talking about a response is very like sort of like the goal, or like I sort of like idealized perhaps, right, and maybe even within particular cultural contexts, right, and the ways that maybe each of us has grown up, or like it's like we can go to a textbook and find what the things that we've just said, right, and we know that like not even just in this space, but like what is on the page doesn't always what like works in real life. You know, so it's great to, and we should aspire to all of the things that we're saying, but there are ways that this might play out in different people's lives in very different ways based on their backgrounds or their identities, or even like maintaining their own safety, right? So I think that like this is important everything we've said, otherwise we wouldn't be saying it. But like also there is room for different interpretations. Like something
Sure.
can be the goal and what is like on paper the best, and also not feasible for someone in their current like context. Does that make sense?
I think so. And yeah, I've been, or how do I want to phrase this? Yeah, I think it like maybe something that like we're trying to emphasize in this space is like our responses to anger should be safe.
Yeah.
And should like prioritize the safety of ourselves and of the other person. But like responses to anger are also very deeply cultural. And that's okay. And so like maybe what is considered even like what is like the best or not the best is depending on your own cultural context and where you live in, like what is operating kind of in your setting, so long as right like our responses to anger always prioritize like the safety and the dignity and just the safety and the dignity of the other person, because they are human, deserve respect and to be treated just as important as we are, or like they're not any better or any worse than we are, and that should be really prioritized in our responses to anger, even if how two people like respond to it is like different or something like that. I'm glad you said that.
To do well, I don't know if we want to do relationship goals. Does anyone else have other things they want to say?
I think we should jump into a relationship goal. I think in part because I think that's a good note to end on, and we have like talked a lot about anger because I think it's something that we should keep talking about.
Okay. Well, I
Allie?
have our relationship goal. So this week, work on creating a processing plan for the next time you find yourself feeling anger. This can look like realizing or identifying that you're feeling angry and thinking about like where that feeling comes from or what has kind of caused that. And then like coming up with your own coping method or methods, because something that works for one thing might not work for another thing, to sort of like help regulate and sort of like calm down a little bit, not necessarily get rid of the emotion, but just sort of like de-escalate a little bit. So that can be things like taking deep breaths, maybe talking to someone, and then thinking about what the next best steps are. So that's kind of like a lot, but it is it all happens much more quickly than I just think I said it. But and then Arianna has our recommendation for the week.
Yes, I do. We are currently reading a book called A Measure of Belonging, 21 Writers of Color on the New American South, edited by Cinelle Barnes. It's just a creative book of essays written about that touches on the complexities of the South and their relationships with different topics such as race, intersectionality, and etc. So I recommend that book for you.
Great, thank you. And thank you all for joining us for episode 6. We will be back next week with a great episode that I won't tell you what it's about because I'm not going to spoil it. I'm just kidding. We have a great episode next week.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Real-ationship Goals. This episode was produced by the Prevention and Education Department of the Advocacy Center for Crime Victims and Children in Waco, Texas. You can follow us on Instagram at ACCVC_prevention. See you next time.